Hello, I'm Al Holtham and welcome to the bottom of my garden, which you may think is a strange place to start a woodworking video, but I'm going to show you how to build this fabulous little chicken coop in our Build It with Bosch series. Hens are becoming increasingly popular to keep. They're very easy, they don't need much space, and you get a constant stream of very fresh and tasty eggs. The design of your coop isn't really that important, but it must be dry and secure, not only to keep the hens in, but also to keep the predators out. This design will house 6 to 8 birds, and being up on legs, it maximises the amount of space they have to run around and also gives the birds some shelter. It should fit in even the smallest of gardens. So let's get back in the workshop and see how it's made, with a little help from Bosch. All the materials are available off the shelf at a DIY store. So we have 75 by 75 softwood for the legs, some 45 by 32 for the frames, tongue and groove boards for cladding, some 15mm exterior ply, and finally some feather edge material for the roof. This has actually been pressure treated. Start with the legs, checking the ends carefully for splits or cracks, and also try and cut out any large knots like this. The top of the leg needs to be cut to 40 degrees. This is dead easy on a miter saw and the cut is then perfectly true. Now cut them to exact length using the stops to make sure they'll all end up exactly the same length. Cut all the framing lengths in the same way, and again these should then all match. I'm just going to screw these frames together using 2.5-inch 10 wood screws. I'm going to put a couple in each joint, but it makes the job a whole lot quicker if you've got 2 drill drivers. In this one I've got a combined countersink and drill bit, so that's 2 operations in one go, and then my screwdriver bit in this one. So let's make a start. To get the joints accurate, you need a nice flat surface. Just line them up and then drill the hole with the countersink. There's one. And then just screw those together. And the second one. That's all nice and flush, and provided the ends will cut square, that should be nice and square too. You can see that's absolutely spot on. Now all you have to do is repeat the procedure for the other 3 corners. That's the first frame complete. The other side is exactly the same, except we need to put in a couple of extra supports for the nest box. Right, so that's the second side finished. You can see the difference. We've got a couple more uprights, a couple more cross pieces, and these just form a framework which we can screw through from the inside to fix the nest box. So I think I'll actually clad these 2 frames next, and for this I'm going to use tongue and groove material. You can use what you want. You can use shiplap, you can use feather edge. I prefer tongue and groove because I think it gives you a much more weatherproof joint. So the first job is obviously to cut all the pieces to length using my miter saw. There's a really good tip here. Don't try and be too clever. I always find if you cut them just a little bit over length and then trim them off as a wanner with a router using a bearing guided cutter, you get a really neat finish. It's much quicker and easier than trying to cut each one spot on to length and line it up with the end of the frames. I'm just going to nail these boards into position. For that I'm going to use my cordless nailer. These are absolutely brilliant, so much more convenient than a gas or an air nailer. You'll see in a minute. I'm going to use 32mm nails. First thing we need to do is select a nice straight piece for the bottom, because everything else is going to work off this first piece we fix in place. So make sure it is nice and straight. And I'm also going to overhang it of the bottom here by about 5 mm. That'll allow the rain that drives against the side to run down and drip off the bottom clear of the base. That's also helped a bit by the fact we've still got the groove on this bottom board. So put that in place, measure about 5 mm, and we're now ready to go. Okay, so now there we are, first side all nailed up. However, as you saw, it's very quick, but I've not been particularly neat. Quite a lot of overhang around these edges. So back to the little tip I talked about earlier. I'm now going to use a router with a bearing guided cutter in the bottom, just run round that and trim it back perfectly neat to the framework. They are a perfect, neat, flush finish. So now just carry on all the way around. And there's the first side completed. Now I just need to do something very similar on the second. So there's the second side completed, very much the same as the other one, apart from of course the large opening here. Always remember when you're routing round an internal opening, always to work clockwise with the router, anti-clockwise round the outside. You can see now why I wasn't too worried about having all those short offcuts. We've used them all up on the side here. So that's the two sides complete. Now it's back to frame making. I can make a frame for either end. Right, so here I am just putting the front frame together. This one has the hole in the front where the hens can come in and out. Then I'm going to clad it all over. When you're doing a frame like this, where there's lots of little pieces, lots of little openings, just lay it all out and think about how you're going to assemble it before you charge on too far. If you're not careful, you end up with a situation like this where I can't actually get my driver in to screw up or even to drill a hole. If you start on the inside, do these two pieces before it's assembled onto these and work outwards, you can usually overcome it. However, if you get stuck, if you've got one of these little drivers like the GSR MX2, amazingly powerful little gadgets, and you can get into the most awkward of inaccessible places. They really are quite clever, these. Right, that's the rear frame completed. The only slight difficulty you might have is in areas like this where you've got screws going at right angles to each other. If that's the case, just angle them slightly so they will clear each other in the middle of the joint. You can see we've got just one big opening on this section. That's because I'm going to put a door on the back so they can actually get inside if need be. And it's just back to cladding in exactly the same way as we did with the two side frames, leaving the pieces of wood a little bit lower length either end, and then I can run around with the router and clean it all up when it's fully assembled. You can see I've just roughly cut that to shape, very rough at this stage, and then just bring these other two and then just pin them in place. One thing is really important is you get good ventilation in your chicken coop. Hens don't like stale air. Now this ventilation doesn't have to be elaborate. All I'm going to do is drill 3 35mm diameter holes in one of the boards near the top. And then I'll just run around the edges with a router when we tidy everything up later. There we go, that's all there is to it, and I'll just run around these edges with a little rounding over bit later on. Okay, that's the cladding in place. You can see the ventilation holes are there. It all looks a bit rough at this stage. It's just ready now for the router treatment, going all around, trimming everything back neat to the framework. There's a really good tip here though. When you've got openings like this, when you're going to trim back, leave plenty of spare material in the corners. You'll see why in a minute. And you can see now how nice and neat those corners are. That's because we left plenty of material when I roughed it out with the jigsaw. Now I'm probably being a little bit fussy here, but just for the sake of completeness, I'm going to use the router again with a tiny little radius bit in it, just to radius these sharp edges all the way around the opening and also around the ventilation holes. And again, remember to work clockwise round an internal opening. Yeah, that looks so much neater. Now it really is finished. That's the front panel. All we need to do now is do the same again for the back one. There we go, that was quick. So that's the rear panel finished. Now all I've got to do is make a door to go on the back, and then we'll hinge this so it opens for easy access. Now to make the door, I've cut 7 more pieces of the tongue and groove material. I've made them about an inch and a quarter longer on either end than the actual opening, because when this door shuts I want there to be no drafts whatsoever. I want it to be totally weatherproof. I've also cut the groove off the bottom board and the tongue off the top one. That leaves me nice straight edges which I can route around when I've got the whole thing together. So now I'm just going to make a very simple framework and screw these onto it, and that should be the door finished. So it's just a simple square framework, just screwed together as we did before. I'll just put this diagonal brace in. Just to stop it sagging. I'll nail that from the other side when the door's done. Right, we really are beginning to get there now. I think the first thing I'll do is tidy up the workshop, make a bit of space, and we'll start putting it all together and fitting the sliding base. There we are, nice and tidy. And somebody's made me a cup of tea as well, so we're good to go. First thing to do is fit the 4 panels we made onto the legs we cut right at the beginning. But I think what I'm going to do before we go any further is just radius the 3 exposed corners on these legs, just take the sharpness away and reduce any risk of them getting chipped or knocked, and also again giving splinters to the birds. So it's back to the router. Okay, so here's the leg clamped in position. I've got the 1 square corner left up flush against the frame, and now I'm just going to drill and screw it through in the same way I've done everything else. I haven't made this very easy for myself because I'm going to have to go at a bit of an angle, but the leg's plenty thick enough, should be no problem there. And again, countersink it well in. Make sure that leg stays in place. Want it nice and flush on the inside. And screw it in. Let's put another one in. I think 3 should probably suffice, give us enough strength. But I am now using 3.5 inch screws rather than the 3 inch. I use the framework, just gives us a little bit more strength. That's that one, take the clamp away. And do the third one. I'm just guessing the position, it's not really that critical. And that's the first leg in position. Now just do the same on the other one. There we go. What do you think of that? Okay, with the 2 ends done, it now starts to get a little bit more difficult. Just locating everything and holding it in place while I screw it together. If you're following the plans, you'll notice that this back panel is very slightly shorter than the 2 sides and the front one. Don't worry, it's meant to be like that. That's to accommodate the pull-out droppings tray, which you'll see in a minute. So I'll just screw these in place. Exactly the same procedure again. I think that's the last one. Now we can see what it actually looks like. The moment of truth. There we go. It's beginning to look a bit like a chicken coop now. It's quite exciting when it all starts coming together. And you see whether it actually all fits together. Should do if you're following the plan. So still a bit to do. We've got to do the roof. We've got to do the sliding door on the front. We've got to hinge the door on the back. And also the sliding droppings tray underneath. To support the slide out base, we need to fit a couple of runners, the full length on the inside. Just put a slight chamfer on the end, so it's not going to be seen from the front. Having nailed those in place, I'm not entirely happy they're going to be firm enough, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 screws along length as well, just to be sure. The last thing we want is for the bottom to be dropping out of our coop, so 3 screws along, and that'll definitely be secure enough. There we go, that's better. Should have done it like that in the first place. Let's do the same again down the other side. Right, I've just finished routing a groove in the strip that'll go across the end. So this will fit in just there, like that. And the board can slide across and get trapped under there and rests on the 2 side rails. There, you can see it a bit better now. The board will slide along on these 2 side pieces and locate under here at this end. I've chamfered the leading edge, top and bottom of this groove, so if the board's a little bit distorted, it'll still push straight in. I've just done that with a little hand plane. For the pull-out base, I'm using 15mm exterior ply. And the best way to handle these large sheets is to lay them on the floor on some bearers and then cut them up with a portable saw. Don't try and be too clever when you're cutting out the base and make it a really tight fit. If it's too tight a fit, you'll find it starts jamming, so keep it fairly slack. I've screwed a piece of 2x1 onto the front edge of the slide out tray. I've screwed it through from underneath, just put 4 screws in it. Now I'm going to fit a cut down piece of the tongue and grooving on the front. I'm just going to pin that in place. Make sure it's nice and flush. Set this back a little bit, so any water running down is going to drip clear rather than run through inside. So that is set back when it's pushed fully back. Right, the nest box is next. As you can see, just another very simple framing job screwed together. You should know the procedure for that by now. The only slightly tricky bit is this top rail here. I've changed the angle of the slope to 25 degrees to give me a bit of extra height here in the back of the box. But this cross rail here really needs a chamfer on the top to match the 25-degree slope, and for that I'm going to use the power plane. Fortunately, the angle doesn't have to be too precise. I'm just going to do it by eye, but I have marked a line just to give me a guide for the slope. Actually, the most difficult part is holding the timber while you plane it, and I've just clamped a couple of pieces of scrap to the bench. So I'm going to set maximum depth of cut and just hope for the best. There we are. That's actually not too bad. Let's try it and see. Look at that. Actually, that's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I think more by luck than anything else on that one. Now all I have to do is just put a couple of screws in to hold it in place. The internal dividers of the nest box, I'm going to use up some of the offcuts of tongue and groove material. I'm going to set these in some grooved uprights. I'm just routing the groove now using a 5/8 bit in the router. And I've cut the groove material piece to go all the way round. Then the tongue and groove offcuts, when I get them the right length, will just sit in like that, and then a capping piece will go on the top. Right, the bottom of the nest box is just a bit of exterior ply, which I'm just going to screw on the bottom. Screw and countersink. You could nail it, I suppose, but I prefer the extra security of screws. There we are. That shouldn't go far. Now I just want to whiz a bit of cladding on the outside. So the nest box now just screws in place. It's fairly heavy, or it will be when it's got all the cladding on, so plenty of screws in. Don't want it falling off. Now I can just pin some tongue and groove boarding all the way around. And I'm going to put a ridge piece in like that. The only snag is, because this angle is actually, the combined angle is actually 100 degrees, I've used a piece of 2x2 or 50x50 with a 90-degree angle. Obviously those angles don't correspond, so I've planed a very slight chamfer down both sides to get this angle on the top here 100 degrees, or approximately. Just get somewhere near. It doesn't have to, it's not that critical, the birds aren't going to notice. And then I'm just going to screw this through from either side, and then I've got a good solid support to fit the roof boards to. So these are the 15mm exterior ply boards. I've just cut to size. I've cut a 40-degree angle as I was cutting them using the guide rail and the portable saw. Makes it very, very easy. And these I'm just going to screw in place. In the same way we've done everything else. Screw and countersink. And screw that well down all round to give us a nice solid roof. And whilst I've got the plunger on the go, I've cut a couple of pieces for the lid on the nest box. little one there the hinges can go onto, and then the lid itself, and we'll hinge that so you can open it up, hopefully get the eggs out from inside. Right, for the pop hole I'm going to have a sliding ply door. I'm going to run that in some runners which I've made by just rebaiting some of the framing material, and they're going to fit on like that, and the ply will run behind them. Again, like the sliding base, don't try and be too clever and make it all too tight. Remember, the ply is bound to swell, it's going to get messed up, it's going to start jamming if it's too tight. Allow plenty of wriggle room on that. So I'm just going to fix those two there, a piece across the bottom, and the door should then just slide in. That's the two runners in place, the door in place. You can see that slides really nice and easily. We just need a handle on that, and that job's done. Okay, so I've spent a couple of hours now just putting the finishing touches to the construction. You can see I put a knob on the slide with a catch at the top so it can be locked up so the hens can go in and out. Have a look down here, you can see I've made a ladder. This is just a piece of plywood with some strips of wood nailed on it to help the hens climb up it. Now I've just fixed this with a large T-hinge underneath. While you're down here, have a look. You see I've made some little oak feet just to raise the softwood legs off the bare earth to stop them having direct contact, and that way I think they'll last a lot longer. They're not going to rot. I put a couple of barge boards on either end of the roof boards because I'm going to put some of the shiplap material on here, but only do that when I actually get on site, so I've left room for that to go on there. Round on this side I've hinged the nest box and put another catch on that so it can be locked shut if necessary. Otherwise we can open up and hopefully get the eggs out from inside. Round the back I've hinged the back opening door and put a catch on that, and while this is open just have a look inside. You can see I've put a perch across the middle there. This is just a piece of the framing material laid flat and with the top two corners well radiused off, and the birds will perch on there overnight. So now all I've got to do is dismantle it all, move it on site, put it together again, nail on the shiplap or the featherboard material on the roof, give it all a good couple of coats of preservative, and then move in our hens. So I'll see you again in a couple of days. So here we are, it's all reassembled, and you can see I've put the feather edge material on the roof and given it 2 coats of preservative. I've already moved in some residents, as you can see, and they're already producing eggs. They're great fun, they're cheap to keep, and these eggs taste so good. I'm Al Holtham. Till next time, bye bye for now.